Hello, folks. It's me again, Amanda Enderman, your trusty tour guide in the wonders of the wonderful city, also known as Rio de Janeiro. I'm not ready yet to part with the Brazilian Empire and go into the very turbulent years of the Brazilian Republic. Once you've covered the coffee cycle and the Paraguay War, there's basically nothing of chronological historic fact to talk about besides the abolition of slavery, and after that, you go into the end of the empire and the beginning of the republic. Especially British people who are watching this, but I guess American people as well. The Brazilian Empire was the equivalent for us of the Victorian age for you. It's a period which is highly idealized for that same reason. Even though it was, yes, the Belle Époque of Rio, as I have already mentioned in the video about the Casa Café, which I will leave the link for you above. The Belle Époque actually ended only in the beginning of the 20th century, which was already the Republican period. But I'll get there. Before I get right onto the theme of the video, I have to remind you that I'm currently offering walking tours through the city of Rio, and these tours are all described on my website, which will be in the description box below, as well as in the first fixed comment. So all you have to do is click there, text me via WhatsApp, that's very important, make your reservations, and let's get to know the city of Rio in person, folks! With me, Amanda Enderman, your trusty tour guide, of course. So now without further ado, let's get right on to the theme of the video. As you probably guessed by the title of the video, we're gonna talk about refinement, culture, much the same way as we did in the video about the French artistic mission. So if you like that video, I hope you like this one as well. Firstly, I have to take you back to the video, which I will also leave up here in the cards for you, which I mentioned about the growth of the city of Rio, which continued, I should say, with the separation between Dom João VI and Dona Carlota Joaquina. From there, Rio started to really grow and expand outside of where nowadays is the downtown area of Rio. And there were successive urban developments from that point until 1870. When we get to the year of 1870, we truly reach a watershed in terms of the development of Rio and the modernization and urbanization as well. Because this year was the year in which industrialization, which had already been slowly established before, but in an embryo kind of way, actually establishes itself in the city of Rio. And also the transport to the suburbs of Rio through trains begins to actually establish itself as well. The railways in Rio first began in 1858, but it is from 1870 that you actually have a constant rhythm of trains going back and forth. Speaking of trains, the trains in Rio actually begin in the Central Station, which is the last station of the downtown area of Rio. And if you ever catch a train to somewhere in the suburb of Rio, in that direction, you're gonna see that the center of every neighborhood revolves around the train station. So it can be said that the trains took progress to the suburbs of Rio already from this point. A little before 1870, in 1868, is when the trolleys, which were transported by donkey power, start to circulate in Rio. We were also singing clang, clang, clang with the trolley, even though as I said before, they were moved on horse or donkey power instead of electric power. Electric power came later. And truth be told, when my father was young, in the 1960s, there were still electric trolleys or trams going through the city of Rio de Janeiro. Nowadays, the only one that still remains is the one in Santa Teresa. Also, this urban explosion meant a population explosion. The population of Rio went from 266,000 to 730,000 inhabitants between the years of 1872 and 1904. And this was largely due to the huge number of immigrants that came here to Brazil, I should say, but we're talking about Rio here, so also to Rio, from all over the world. As a matter of fact, the very famous Saara was established by immigrants from Syria, Lebanon, Portugal, and also Jewish immigrants. But already in the 1800s, the very first incentive to immigration to Brazil was with the marriage of Dom Pedro II to the Princess Teresa Cristina of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. At first, the only immigrants who had, shall we say, incentive to come to Brazil were, in fact, Italian immigrants. Italians watching this video, this is why in Brazil we have a lot of Italian families, more so in São Paulo than in Rio and in the south, but also in Rio. And most of these families are, yes, from the south of Italy. Not all of them, of course, but most of them. And it's precisely because Princess Teresa Cristina was from the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, nowadays Naples and Sicily. Another interesting fact about this time is that from the time of Dom João VI and Carlota Joaquina, when they separated, the old houses, which used to be inhabited by aristocrats, were abandoned because these aristocrats followed either one of the two to the North Zone or to the South Zone. So these houses started being inhabited by poor people, and when the immigrants came here, by them. And they were called cortiços. They had several rooms, occupied each family to a room, and bathrooms and kitchens were shared. Keep that in mind because that's going to be important in future videos. If you would like to have a taste, quite literally, of what the Belle Époque was like, you can do so at the Casa Café, which I will leave the link for you as well up here of the video I made at the Casa Café speaking about it in the series Places in Rio. But, my friends, we simply cannot speak about the Brazilian Empire and most especially the Belle Époque of Rio and Brazil without talking about the Romantic era. Romantic literature is what set the trend. The Romantic novels here in Brazil, though there were also poems in the Romantic age, as a matter of fact, the Romantic age began in 1836 with the publishing of the book Suspiros Poéticos e Saudades, translating poetic sighs and nostalgias, so a book of poems. But there were also novels. However, they were published one chapter every week, kind of like Netflix in written form. This is the basis for every single soap opera that you can see in Brazil. As a matter of fact, the very first book, which was published in this style, one chapter every week, was A Moreninha, which translates to the little dark-haired girl. In the structure of the romantic novel, first you have a basic presentation of the status quo where the plot will unfold, and the villain begins having several waves of bad luck, which culminate with the happy ending of the story, where there is at least one marriage and at least one birth every time. And also, incidentally, marriage, or the wedding, is portrayed as the happy ending and solution to all problems in life. Oh, we only wish right? There were romantic novels from this period which took place in the interior of the country, but the ones that were the biggest hits and the trendsetters, of course, were the ones that took place in the city of Rio. Because, well, plain and simple, people who lived in the interior of the country wanted to know what was trending in the capital of the country. In regards to the romantic poems, they are separated in 3 different generations. The first one is the Indianist generation, which praises and emphasizes the noble savage, meaning the natives, the indigenous peoples of Brazil. But of course, in a very romanticized way, so no romantic writer of this generation ever bothered to visit an indigenous tribe and research what the actual customs of these tribes were so that he could portray them accurately in his book. And the reason why we were idealizing the indigenous, better yet, the noble savage, was because while in Europe they were idealizing the medieval knight and the damsel in distress and chivalry, we were idealizing our equivalent of the medieval and chivalrous knight, which was the noble savage. Other sentiments which characterize this generation are patriotism and the idealization of nature and forests as national symbols. It's not for nothing that I'm dressed like this. Minha terra tem palmeiras onde canta o sabiá. As aves que aqui gorjeiam não gorjeiam como lá. Minha terra tem primores que tais não encontro eu cá. Em cismar sozinho à noite, mais prazer encontro eu lá. Minha terra tem palmeiras onde canta o sabiá. Não permita, Deus, que eu morra sem que eu volte para lá, sem que desfrute os primores que eu não encontro por cá, sem que ainda viste as palmeiras onde canta o sabiá. The next generation of romanticism was the ultra-romantic generation, which is just like the ultra-romantics in Europe. The characteristics are escapism, pessimism, nostalgia, romantic suffering, sentimental exaggeration, and the ideal woman, which in the previous generation was the indigenous woman, in the ultra-romantic generation is pale, virginal, angelic, just like me. Just kidding. The grief of losing the loved woman is a recurring theme. Oh, que saudades que tenho da aurora da minha vida, da minha infância querida, que os anos não trazem mais. Como são belos os dias no despontar da existência. Respira a alma inocência como perfumes à flor. O mar é lago sereno, o céu um manto azulado, o mundo um sonho dourado e a vida um hino d'amor. The third generation and last one of the Romantic age is called in Portuguese condoreira, or another name for that is social poetry, which involves a social critique and at this time was emphasized in abolitionism. The main author of this generation is Castro Alves, which writes poems criticizing the evils of slavery in Brazil. Lá na úmida senzala, sentado na estreita sala, junto ao braseiro, no chão, entoa escravo o seu canto, e ao cantar correm-lhe em pranto saudades do seu torrão. Minha terra é lá bem longe, das bandas de onde o sol vem. Esta terra é mais bonita, mas a outra eu quero bem. And of course, I will talk about the abolition of slavery in future videos, so stay tuned for that. This criticism of social norms at the time, paved the way for the next style of literature, which was present at this time, realism. Realism is basically the opposite of romanticism. Things are depicted as they are. Realism criticizes everything, and it was first started by Machado de Assis in 1881 with the publishing of his novel Memórias Póstumas de Brás Cubas, or translating, Posthumous Memories of Brás Cubas. This author, to my great surprise, and I'm being very honest here, I did not know this until I was researching to make this video, he was a romantic author himself before this, and he decided to break with romanticism and become a realistic one. If you haven't yet read The Posthumous Memories of Brás Cubas, I highly recommend that you read. And by the way, this is required reading in most, if not all, high schools here in Brazil. You can ask Brazilians and they will know this book, because if they didn't have to read it, they had to study about it in high school. In this book, he criticizes everything, especially romance, and especially the female gender. And it's not to say that he didn't like women, quite the opposite. He was very happily married, and when he became a widower, he was terribly struck with grief. Make no mistake about it. But in his books, he completely criticized the romantic ideals. And as a matter of fact, one of the main characters' many romances depicted in this book that I mentioned is Marcela, which in the book itself, he says, Marcela loved me during 15 months and 11 contos de réis. Contos de réis, incidentally, was the currency of the time. It's a very ironic way of saying that she was only interested in his money and nothing more. So needless to say, I think it's made quite clear, realism broke with the romantic idealization and showed reality as it was. No more sugarcoating. Thank goodness, because I was getting a cavity just watching. How about you? Leave it in the comment section below. This concludes this video about the Belle Epoque of Rio, and I hope you liked this video. And if you did like the video, be sure to hit that like button, then right after that hit that subscribe button, but most importantly hit multiple times on that share button so that each time more people may know about the wonders of the wonderful city. And as usual in this channel, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!